Welcome to the Launching IoT Learnings. Today's a bit different because I want to highlight the effects of the Corona or Covid-19 pandemic on the IoT industry. All these interviews have been done over the last kind of 8-9 weeks. So all of them have been during the lockdown periods in various countries. During those conversations, there's a couple of things. There's two sides to Corona within IoT. Number one, there's so many startups that are being affected, their businesses are being affected, and how are they going to see through that in the same that a number of other industries are affected. But the other is where the technology can actually be used to help provide solutions, completely new ways of working, new solutions which can actually help fight some of the problems that have arisen from the COVID pandemic. So here we talk to a few people who have been affected the most or can affect the solutions the most. And so some really interesting stories came out here and from a number of different perspectives within the ecosystem. So enjoy.
We've really had two sides to the crisis with coronavirus for our business. The first is that some of the massive projects we had won just before the lockdowns started in various countries literally just stopped overnight. We had pending orders for millions of sensors for especially corporate real estate. So we do a lot of desk occupancy and meeting rooms and air quality monitoring in offices. That literally stopped happening overnight. We got a couple of clients that are restarting actually in preparation for going back to work. But the big projects we had won, we kind of lost. And hopefully they'll come back some point, but that, who knows? We were fortunate that we got contacted by a large pharma to help them with what turned out to be a contact tracing project for one of their factories in Malaysia. And that turned into a bit of a success story overnight because we got picked up by the Financial Times. We actually made a front page of the Financial Times in the UK, which is a big business newspaper. And that just gave us suddenly this little tiny 30-odd people company out of the US and the UK. We are literally being contacted by every major corporation across the world. Everyone suddenly wants to resell our services, which is great because that's the path we were on anyway. But we've never obviously had such a busy pipeline of people coming to say, I'd love to understand how your solution works and what it does. And actually, we realized that obviously contact tracing being very important, but was a great lever for us to talk about the other solutions we have, which are related to keeping infection at bay, whether it's cleaning of toilets better, whether it's monitoring the occupancy so that you are respecting the social distancing rules, whether it's we've invented something called touch-free feedback, which again is a nice and easy way to allow employers to monitor the wellness of their employees using simple QR codes and things like that. So we found ourselves fortunate enough to be at the right place at the right time and able to kind of turn one of our solutions that was historically used for asset zoning, so knowing how many wheelchairs or bed I have in a hospital, repurpose it for that contact tracing, which meant that we didn't have a long lead time from a procurement of hardware or anything like that. We just had to make some changes to the software. And that's been, again, one of the reasons we're able to go to market so quickly on that.
Well, we have a technology to do something really fast, enterprise level. So what could we potentially do to help this? And the very first application concept we designed and built, we built in 3 days, was quarantine tracking. Because people had to go in quarantine and stay there for 14 days, for example. They weren't respecting the rules and they were spreading the virus. They went out and bought some bread at the bakery anyway, and they shouldn't. And there's so many, so many parties and barbecues in each other's gardens, and you shouldn't. So that was the first thing we did. Then a government heard about this and asked us, could you make that contact tracing app on your smartphone that the entire population of the country could do? And we could. We were then involved in writing white papers for the task forces as well, as in how should you do this, talk to the ministers and the senators, and help them. But we immediately also made a third solution, which is the private proximity. Why? Because everybody's going to object against using personal data. And this, again, it's proven right because it was all over the news. Now, that third one, has been extremely successful. And so there's a couple of reasons why it's successful. First of all, it is dedicated hardware. So it's a tracker, you wear it. Again, we're agnostic, so we work with multiple trackers, not one solution, not one product, your solution. And this one works good for that one for that one. Because if you do it with smartphones, and then Apple and Google later on decided to start working together, because even the way they treat BLE information is different, or signals. But still, I could have a smartphone that's 5 years old with a very different antenna than you would have. That would mean that if you and I would be standing in front of each other, I could record you being close and you could not record me being close.
Yeah.
Your data's not correct. If you don't have good data, there's no project. You cannot do anything. You lose so much more time on the rest. So we came up and we started talking to a couple of device makers, asking, could you change your firmware to this and that functionality? We're not firmware developers, so that we can do this contact tracing. And then we built the application in about 5 days, and we already had partners, and it gave us a lot of good feedback. First of all, it was a solution. Secondly, it was easy to sell. Thirdly, we could prove to our partners, the resellers, that we do what we say. We can build an application, an enterprise solution in 5 days.
A sensor is always complicated. Right now with this Corona tracer, Bluetooth, measuring distance, well, it appears to be much more complicated than you initially think.
Yes, Christine. So Meshed has been helping communities and cities and governments with understanding the impact, the social, mobility and economic impacts of COVID-19 onto communities. And we are using pedestrian flow or pedestrian counting information that's been generated off the Meshed nCounter people counting solution, which we have distributed across multiple cities with over 100 locations that we've selected to do this study. And we're doing a time series analysis on what did a normal pattern look like pre-COVID, and then during COVID, and now sort of post-COVID. Although here we are today, we're seeing even a resurgence in Australia, which has had very strict social distancing and travel bans. We're seeing a bit of an uptake now in some of our communities. But what we're going to be doing is we're publishing this independent research. We're doing it in partnership with the University of Wollongong. And it's going to help cities with understanding how do they recover and where do we need to focus on targeted stimulus and programs to stimulate back the local economies. And we are talking local economies. We're talking at the neighbourhood level because pedestrian flow information can be sourced from parks, railway stations, central business districts, libraries, swimming pools, public places. And so we're trying to bring the story together. And we're very proud of that work, and we will be publishing it very shortly. But on LinkedIn, we've been publishing the Meshed COVID Pedestrian Index. And the idea for that came where, as an industry here in Australia, we thought it would be a great opportunity for different technology solution providers to think about ways in which they could help with COVID-19. Now, of course, there are some more obvious, examples where organisations that have been manufacturing, for example, medical equipment, and we're using IoT for resource management and equipment monitoring and all of that. Tracking and tracing is a really good, example of how IoT and data is helping, health authorities and governments around the world to deal with the issue. But because we are very focused around the cities and infrastructure space, we thought there was something in taking a deeper look into pedestrian counting information and seeing what insights we could get out of that. Because it's about looking at the actual economic and social impacts. And the other solution that we're also deploying is proximity sensing. So we're using IoT and LoRaWAN and the Things Network to help our customers as they return to work. So major universities, you know, councils who are running libraries and sporting facilities, property owners and precinct owners that are having to you know, provide obviously services to people as they come into public spaces. So this proximity sensing as well, we think also is a really good application of IoT, where you can use, combined with pedestrian counting, you can start to then understand that as places fill and these workers are interfacing to those numbers, then, you know, you can send out alerts and they can help guide basically social distancing and ensuring that people are going about their daily lives in a much safer manner.
You know, helping, you know, certainly in this day and age, helping people, entities, companies that are struggling is now more important than ever. And something that I value tremendously. You know, I've seen now a lot of companies that are not just struggling, that are probably going to be going away, you know, and you want to understand, what if there's just a little bit of help that I can do here, and that little help will sustain that company through the end of this quarantine.
IoT Scotland for Good. So we've opened up the network for free for companies that want to use the technology for responding to COVID-19. If it's related to getting Scotland back to, you know, whatever we can call normal in the future, then we want to do that and help support companies by offering the network for free.
This is, I think, something that can be broadly used everywhere. And there's really some basic capabilities that exist in the ecosystem today that can be applied to this problem. And if you think about that, so in a smart building, a connected office kind of environment, even simple things like temperature, humidity, air quality monitoring are the key metrics that you can use to understand, you know, has your building the correct airflow patterns? Is it taking, you know, is it bringing new air in? Do you see these events? So we've seen those trends to be very indicative of the quality of the air and the various other things that are very important to saying it's safe to have people in the building, because we know that the air is being filtered, that it's that's coming out. So we interesting. The other thing that I think is a bit more novel right now, as it were, that I think is going to be very, very important as we come out of this, is you see that how the healthcare system has been stressed. And I think there's a whole application of low power technology for that can be enormously valuable. And so I think those kinds of use cases will start showing up. And in some cases, they may even start being legislated as being requirements for how these critical care facilities are able to expand, you know, when surges show up.
It's fascinating when during this period people are like, oh, we're not good at IoT. We don't do the IoT deployment because it's not essential. Company that calls you is like, wow, we are doing essential stuff. Our workers cannot go to work. We need remote management. So you see who is going to make it or who is not going to make it.